Today I'm joined by Damien. He's the founder and the CEO of Liminal VR.
I started Liminal with my co-founder Nick in late 2014. So we were really struck by the power that virtual reality had to induce and augment emotional states.
I mean, it fascinated me when I first did a kind of a dive into all the trailers that you guys had on YouTube and the website and everything. So I was like, didn't want to be going into this interview with the only thing that I knew was the 30-second experience I'd had in VR myself. And
We've been a self-funded company, still to this day. So at the same time, we had to realize, oh, holy crap, how are we going to fund all of this?
It's so funny you should mention schools, because it was one of the things that I thought when I found is it could be so well used for is a therapy aspect or for kids in school. I remember when I was at school, and it's not too long ago now, that they still have kids when they lose their temper go and stand in a room, hold their breath and count to 10 or whatever it is that they do.
If you are in a really bad state of mind, just being able to put on a headset that the kids love and just chill out and do something either fun or relaxing for 5 or 10 minutes, you come out the other side feeling very different.
It's the only thing you can't train. You can train up and upskill everything else, but you can't train a good personality.
Every single time we've made a decision to put someone on because we were in a pinch and we needed someone and we found someone technically very, very good, but we had doubts about them. Every single time we made the decision to put them on, it turned into a nightmare.
Good. So yeah, today I'm joined by Damien. He's the founder and the CEO of Liminal VR. He's been doing some absolutely amazing things in the space. When I got my very first Oculus, I think it was the Quest 1, I actually experienced one of the liminal experiences, as you could call them. It was the one with the lotus flower, where it was like the calming one. And I think at the time, I don't know if it still is, but it was one of those free trials you could do the Oculus. And so I was just testing out basically everything I could do when I first got it set up. And it was really insane, because it's one of those things where you don't really think that maybe a meditative experience could happen in a VR world, especially in the kind of quite graphically simple VR worlds we're going through at the moment. But it had a major impact on me, especially in lockdown. It was like the stress levels just decreased. What was the thought process behind deciding to start setting it up? Because you weren't in the VR space before.
No, so if you like, I can give you a little bit of background. So I started Liminal with my co-founder Nick in late 2014. So we were really struck by the power that virtual reality had to induce and augment emotional states. And what I mean by that is, fun things in VR are really fun, scary things are really scary. There was something quite unique to the medium, experiencing content from a first-person perspective, that really got us very excited about it. And basically, we both completely pivoted our lives. I had a small IT business, and Nick was working as a lawyer. And then we just jumped into the VR space and recruited a team and started R&D and rapid prototyping. And 8 years later, here we are.
Was that difficult then? Because I mean, my background's in the recruitment space, in the kind of video game and Web3 industry, and I'm probably aware as aware as you can be, that getting really kind of top level or really qualified guys to join a project, especially in the beginning phase, or a project with, like you guys, you said yourselves, you kind of hopped into it without a background in the industry. Was it difficult kind of getting people on board and bought into that?
Yes. So in late 2014, first we had to know what we wanted to do, and because we like I said, we've come from these different sort of industries, and we really didn't even understand a lot of the basics around what's a VR developer, right? Like, how does that differ from a standard Unity developer? What tools do they need? So we started going to meetups, and we had some mixed results. We would meet some people that we thought were really competent, and then they turned out not to be. We could sort of see through that. And then we met our first CTO, Lachlan, who was actually really good. And so he was great on the tools. He'd been creating small experiences that he'd released on Google Cardboard and stuff, so we could actually use the stuff that he had done. And then we recruited researchers and artists, and we just went through this. I guess the first few years was really R&D and rapid prototyping to really work out what was working and what wasn't, and which directions we wanted to go in. And then at the same time, we've been a self-funded company, still to this day. So at the same time, we had to realize, oh, holy crap, how are we going to fund all of this? So we launched effectively a separate branch to our business where we do a whole bunch of training and simulation, marketing, clinical experiences for clients. So the workflow at Liminal has always been delivering projects for clients, like a real business making money to fund everything, and then having this R&D agenda where we're learning how to do all this stuff, and then actually building the Liminal platform and eventually our partnership program that I'd love to talk about a little bit later, and to get to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that as well, actually, and I mean, it fascinated me when I first did a kind of a dive into all the trailers that you guys had on YouTube and the website and everything. So I was like, I didn't want to be going into this interview with the only thing that I knew was the 30-second experience I'd had in VR myself. And one of the things that I noticed that really caught my eye was the fact that you guys talked to, and I may be completely butchering the actual names of these professions, but think like psychologists and neurologists, to find out what it is that makes people tick and how you get different reactions out of them. It was something that I actually was considering doing in a way smaller sense myself. When I was a kid, I wanted to make a video game that was similar to this kind of exploration and was very based on decreasing stress levels and creating a calming environment. And so I was talking to psychologists that were in local universities. What specifically happened there that you didn't necessarily expect when you were like, okay, we're going to be making VR worlds? Did they ever come back to you and were like, yeah, this is how you're going to have to do it? And you were like, oh, okay, that doesn't necessarily fit into the plan we had.
Yeah. So we experimented with a lot of things. Um, I guess one of the so maybe I'll give you a little bit more context, and then if you like, if it's okay, I'll jump into why we started our partnership program and how that works. I think that'll give a little bit more context too. So for the first couple of years, we're really referencing a lot of these psych papers and research that had previously been conducted, and doing rapid prototyping in house. And then we get small groups of people to our office and be trying to take biometric readings and asking them psychometric questionnaires and seeing how different things worked. But after, at the beginning, we're specifically focusing on calming and energizing experiences. We've really expanded the categories since then. But one of the big things that we learned in the first couple of years is that not only is it possible to create these experiences that can have these profound psychological outcomes, if you know some relatively basic techniques, it can be quite easy. So then we consolidated all of our research into these really easy to use how-to guides. And at VRLA in 2017, we launched a global partnership program where we're now working with schools and universities and other developers all around the world that are accessing our research, and also having to go at building these types of experiences.
It's so funny you should mention schools, because it was one of the things that I thought when I found it is there must be such, especially in the, I know you guys, you've broadened out into training and kind of multifaceted experiences. But you're not just creating a sense of calm. You've got a million different emotions that you can experience in this. But one of the things that it could be so well used for is a therapy aspect, or for kids in school. I remember when I was at school, and it's not too long ago now, that they still have kids when they lose their temper go and stand in a room, hold their breath, and count to 10 or whatever it is that they do.
Yeah.
And which is such a go to any teenager and you make them go do breathing exercises in front of the teacher that's just been yelling at them. They're just going to get more mad. But there must be such a potential use for this in kids with anger issues, kids with ADHD, children that are going through a loss of a family member that have to go into school. Have you seen, cases where it's been used like that at all?
Yes, yeah. So a few years ago, we received a grant to do a pilot to have Liminal in a bunch of schools here in Victoria, in Australia. And we've recently received another grant that is allowing us to make it available to all high schools in Australia for free. So, for a year or so. So, 100% what you just mentioned. If you are in a really bad, state of mind, just being able to put on a headset that the kids love, and just chill out and do something either fun or relaxing for 5 or 10 minutes, you come out the other side feeling very different. So you're 100% right. That's a very good use case.
I guess that's the only problem that you might experience because it's a VR headset. Little Timmy throws a pencil at the teacher and then he gets to go use the VR headset. So, like that with me, I'd be throwing a pencil every day and I'd be like, let's get to go again.
Good point.
They might cotton on to that one though. They'll be like, are you actually throwing the pencil? Or with this old chestnut, we've seen this one before.
Well, look, luckily we haven't had too much feedback around that, but it's something that will keep me up at nights now. So thanks for that, Caspian.
No. It's okay. It will only be the twisted evil children like I was that will be doing that. So it won't be a reflection on you. But yeah. Okay. So I mean, I get why you chose VR then, because it's it's definitely like the most sensory, sensory involved medium we have at the moment. Have you ever, considered branching out into, AR? I know there's a lot of stuff around that now. I don't know how would that work if you guys were going to do that.
Yeah, look, I guess so. AR right now, like from the perspective of the futuristic, you're wearing normal looking glasses and you're in an mixed reality or augmented reality world. That's still a ways away. Once we get there, I'm sure there's lots of stuff that we could do in that space, and very, very open to it. But yeah, right now, like mobile phone based AR, where you're like holding up your phone and fancy things are happening in your environment, I think is really cool. But I don't know if that would have the types of really salient effects that we've been getting through the immersive VR experiences.
I guess, yeah, you're never going to get the level of immersion with AR that you can get with VR. It's always going to be maybe the closest thing you would be getting is a kind of almost slight visual change and a voice kind of coming in, but it wouldn't have the same effect. I could agree. You mentioned something earlier though that it triggered something in me, but I wanted to wait for the right point to kind of come back to it on. And when you were talking about setting up the actual company and you guys were hiring, you didn't really know necessarily what you were looking for at the beginning, and you were kind of figuring it out as you went along. In my line of work, when I'm talking to mainly developers, I get a lot of people that are just kind of uni or people with internships or a year's experience that would say, how do I transition into one space or another space, whether it's blockchain or VR or whatever it is? How do I get into a AAA industry? What would be something that developers coming out of uni might not know, that it's like, oh, this is something that in VR developers we love. It's like if you can do this or you've been doing this is amazing.
Well, so we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 8 years, as you could imagine. How we handle recruitment now is that we have everyone do a technical interview with our CTO. And that is just because we were having people applying for positions who were like very confident that they had 10, 15 years of experience. But then when we hired them, that wasn't reflective of their work. And then there were other sort of, I guess, younger people like the ones you're speaking about straight out of uni that maybe we weren't given a chance because they didn't have that experience. But what we have found now is like that there are some, there's some younger people that have been coding since they were 12. So you might be you might be 21 years old and have just finished uni, but you've been coding for 9 years. You've released a game on Steam. It's great. Like it's crazy for us to not engage with them. So now we basically look at people's portfolio, look at what they've done. Ideally, if we can get access to some kind of Git repo, so we can see what their coding is like that helps. And then our standard processes, we have our CTO, and this is specifically for developers, but we have our CTO do a quick, like a 10, 15-minute interview, because oftentimes we found that during the full technical interviews, we're learning pretty early on that people weren't suited, so there wasn't any point putting them through the whole thing. So he'll do a quick 10, 15-minute interview, and then if they're good, he'll get them back in to do the full technical interview, and then he'll give us a report, and then Nick and I will arrange a meeting with them, and basically that meeting is pretty much what Nick and I refer to as like the dickhead test. Like as long as they're not a dickhead at that point, and we feel that they're going to be a good fit for the culture of the company, and we're going to be able to work with them, then we give them a shot.
I worked with a company in the US at one point that had the exact same thing. They called it the insanity test, and
Yeah,
it was one last check just to make sure this person's not like a psycho.
yeah,
And sometimes, we joke about it, but every so often someone can, interview at different kind of specialized interviews. They could interview really well technically, really interview really well from a team standpoint, and then you could come in and kind of go, okay, so what is it you want to be doing? And they'll sit down and they'll go, yeah, well, to be honest, I don't really want to be in this branch of work. I'd rather be somewhere else. And you're like,
yeah,
whoa, how the hell did you make it to this stage of an interview and that slip fast?
yeah. Yeah, and it's such a problem. Like we've had people on before that have missed stand up, for example, and then we contact them and ask them why, and they're like, "Well, I was having breakfast." It's like, well, okay.
Yeah,
So
but at least lie about a family
yeah,
emergency.
that's
Come on.
right.
At least pretend that there's something like you've missed a train or something like that.
Yeah, but it is like
But
what I will say to sort of speak to the point that you made too, is that culture and personality is so important as well, and that's something that we really didn't realize until a few years down the track. You can have someone who is technically perfect, but if they don't really believe in your mission, if they are someone who people in the company aren't going to enjoy working with, well, then it's never worth it. Like every single time we've made a decision to put someone on because we were in a pinch and we needed someone, and we found someone technically very, very good, but we had doubts about them. Every single time we made the decision to put them on, it turned into a nightmare. So we're now very like that final interview, the no ticket test is, is even more important than the technical interview, because you can always upskill someone if they have a good attitude and they're keen.
yeah,
But if someone, like you said, if someone doesn't want to be there or doesn't believe in what you're doing, there's no point.
it's absolutely spot on. I mean, it's exactly what I was going to say. It's the only thing you can't train. You can train up and upskill everything else, but you can't train a good personality or personality that fits with the one at the company. Sometimes there are companies where the ethos is kind of like, look, we're here to work, and we're all going to kind of graft our asses off, and we're going to get this deadline out, and then everyone can go home basically and go do whatever you want to do. And then there's other companies where it's way more like everyone here is here for the long haul, and it's all a project we believe in. And those different environments will work for different people.
Yeah, and we are very careful at Liminal to have, we don't have a crunch culture. Like we don't expect people to work hours beyond what we're paying them for. but like we do expect people to rock up on time when we're having
Yeah.
our morning meetings, and to be available during the day. And we're very flexible. We have a very laissez-faire approach in many ways to management, in the sense that if you're doing your work, and we can see the result of that, you're not going to get hassled by us. We'll just let you be. And some people really thrive in those conditions, but some people also don't like it. Some people like having very specific, constant direction. So it's
Yeah.
about finding that the right fit as well.
Well, also, I mean, you mentioned earlier with regards to like the people that you would find that's, sometimes you could find someone that's, like you said, been doing it since they were a kid and watching YouTube and stuff. I think video games is one of the first, if not the first industry where that's been like a massive thing, where, all the generations, but especially the generations that are growing up at the moment, are in this new age of you can literally learn anything online. If you put enough effort into it, especially digital skills, everything's available to get to a professional standard online. And I can't think of another industry where you could start watching YouTube in school, come out the other end, and be able to get into it like a very qualified, really quite well paying job, compared to you could learn the same coding skills and you wouldn't be getting a job in cybersecurity.
Yeah. No, look, you're 100% right. And at the end of the day, as a business owner and CEO, it's we just want people that can do the job. Like if like I read this book years ago on oh god, it must have been like 15 years ago, on some of the world's best hackers, and one of them was this kid that grew up in India, relatively poor, and he didn't have a computer, and he taught himself how to code with a notepad, with pen and paper. He would just write down the code, and he became this like amazing programmer. So look, as long as you have the skills and you do well, and the technical test, and you're a good person, like I don't really mind what your background is, or what qualifications you have.
Well, you must know better than anyone with regards to, just to kind of do a bit of a 180. I know, I'm sure you'll get tired if I kind of hound you on types of people you hire all day. And we kind of touched on it earlier when we were talking about the things you've done, how you moved into from the original Liminal VR into the partnerships program you've done, and
Hmm.
everything since then. Of course, one of the things you must be taking into account when you're starting new projects or kind of setting your coming years plan is the fact that these new kind of VR devices are coming out. So it's like with you maybe sometimes planning for a VR headset that is lighter, smaller, less or more processing power, or whatever it may be, as well as each headset has all these completely different pros and cons. Where do you see the future of VR going? Is it a graphical thing? Is it a maneuverability thing?
Oh, um, yeah. Look, it's difficult because you hear so many different things from different experts, right? So, foveated rendering is a good example, right? Where it's I've for years I've been like hanging out for eye tracking, for foveated rendering, but then sort of John Carmack got up at, I think the last Meta Connect, and basically said that it wasn't going to be a thing because it's not sort of fast enough. Same with I guess cloud gaming. Like, can we get the latency down to what we needed to work? So like the ideal situation would be, and I think we'll get there. What I'm not sure about is timeframes, but where you have all the content that's rendered in supercomputers in the cloud, that's delivered to your headset via you know 4, 5, 6, 7G, whatever it is, with massively low latency, and you have retinal level resolution, and eye tracking, and it's indistinguishable from reality. So I think there'll be a time where we get there. I don't know whether that'll be 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, but that's that's the hope, I guess.
I mean, I'd love to touch on something you said there. For the people that don't necessarily haven't nerded out about it like we have before, cloud gaming. If you explain it to me as if I was like a baby, what would that be with regards to VR?
Well, I guess so. So right now, with virtual reality, you effectively have standalone headsets like the Meta Quest, the Quest 2 or the Quest Pro, and they're they're really fantastic devices. I often give presentations where I talk about the history of VR, and I usually start around the 1930s with the advent of the 1830s with the first stereoscopic plates, and I'll go through this whole like evolution. So to see where we've got to now, where you have a self-contained VR system that effectively, you don't need any external sensors, and the whole thing fits into the size of a shoebox, and you can run you can create some really amazing, relatively high fidelity stuff on there. Is a miracle of technology. People complain that it's still, maybe a little bit uncomfortable, and yet the form factor. We're at a stage where we're not at a stage of infancy anymore. We're at a stage of adolescence where the technology as it is right now is very useful and very good, but it's not the full mature technology that it's going to be. And then you have those same headsets like the Quest 2 and the Quest Pro. You can tether them to a computer, a gaming PC, either wirelessly or with a cable, and then you can utilize the GPU, the graphics processor on that gaming computer to deliver much higher resolution experiences and do lots of different things that you can't do on a mobile chipset. So the dream of, I guess, sort of cloud gaming is where you effectively have supercomputers in the cloud, or something like AWS that has the same amount of grant, if not more, than a traditional gaming PC, and that can render the content for you, and then at very low latencies and high bandwidth, transmit it to your virtual reality headset. So that way, it allows you to actually make the headsets thinner, and the form factor bring it right down, because you don't need a lot of the built-in GPUs and stuff that you have now. But you know that is still like there's some great work that's been done in that space. Like we've worked with Pluto VR with their Pluto Sphere platform, and sort of done some of that. But it's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, I had to find that out the hard way myself. I did a little bit of research into it and made a LinkedIn post just about like cloud gaming and how it could be applied to VR and this kind of concept of the metaverse in general. And I was immediately, I don't think it would be the first time in a long time I'd had that much engagement on a post. And it was basically everyone that was in the space going like, no, no. We've got so far to go with the things that you're talking about are not near at all.
Yeah.
Or at least not conceptually.
One of the big problems with virtual reality up until now has just been the like physics of it, right? So you like when I talk about like my usual rant about the history of VR. So like the first virtual reality headset in a form factor anything close to what we think of VR today was like in the late 60s, and then you had in the 80s you had the first iPhone EYE phone, which was a very basic virtual reality headset that like NASA was experimenting with. And then you had like the Lawnmower Man, which was this movie that came out, and you had like it was like part of the zeitgeist. But it wasn't really until the Oculus Rift Kickstarter that triggered, I guess, what we refer to in the industry as new VR. But then you had this, I guess, motion to photon latency. There was like 20 odd milliseconds. So for those who are watching that don't know what that is, it's basically when you're wearing a virtual reality headset, when you turn your head, there is a lag between you turning your head and the image catching up. So now pretty much since around 2012, we've been able to get that lag down to 20 milliseconds or less, which makes virtual reality experiences that are well designed, very, very comfortable for the vast majority of people. So when you're talking about cloud gaming, then you have to get that motion to photon latency to that stage or close to it. If not, you're kind of going back to why VR wasn't a huge success in the 90s and noughties, before the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've already gotten that speed down massively. How do you then have a signal that's kind of being bouncing out, bouncing in, bouncing all the way back out again, and you're still having it all done in that exact same time frame?
Yeah.
Which I don't envy you for trying to have it. The industry for figuring out that one. I think I'll leave that to you guys. But I think there's one question I've been waiting to ask since the beginning, and I'm hoping and praying that you give me a yes. So I have found out about the idea of this with my friends and family basically since the first headset came out. Do you think it's possible if we took like omnidirectional treadmills, VR headsets, and I forget what they're called, but those suits that can transmit the concept of a push or a feel, like a light sense? Could we have a kind of esports in VR where it's Call of Duty or something, but everyone's actually running around and really doing it?
Look, for sure, and I think I'm at Liminal, where I guess we are not a traditional gaming company. Like gaming isn't a thing. We have short experiences that change how you feel and perform, right? So it's not my sort of space, the whole VR e-gaming space, but I do know people who play VR games competitively and stuff, and I think all of that is coming. The short answer to that is yes, you could probably do that to a degree today with off the shelf technology. Like I think those Tesla suits are relatively good. And then there's a bunch of omnidirectional treadmills. So the answer is yes. And I think like what's really important, and again why I often go through this whole history of VR when I'm speaking to people or giving presentations, is because if you really aren't that familiar with virtual reality and you come into it cold, you might think, okay, well, VR is this thing that I used 2 years ago and it made me sick. And now, Facebook have pivoted to Meta and they're hemorrhaging money and it'll be gone soon. And, it's not something that I ever have to worry about. Whereas in actual fact, it's this really transformative technology that is effectively opening the door to infinite novelty and experiences, and that we've been working on for like over 100 years, right? So once you realize the journey that we've been on, we're up to now, like with devices like the Quest Pro and the R&D that's been done to where it's going to be in the future. In my mind, it is just a matter of time until VR is ubiquitous, and then everything changes, right? So it's a really interesting concept. Like, is it going to be like Ready Player One? Probably not. Hopefully not.
Well, that's another problem, isn't it? I think a lot of people, maybe one of the reasons why there was this kind of weird, for a little while it became trendy to be like kind of put VR down. And I think a big part of that was things like Ready Player One, where people weren't considering things like, what's happening here, where it's being implemented in schools and universities and, for these amazing real life applications. And instead, people were going, oh, hang on a second, why can't I have a photorealistic car race with every character from pop culture? And it's like, it's so much bigger than that. It's the equivalent of having a computer and being disappointed that you can't jump in and experience Tron.
Yeah. Well, but look, so I'm probably giving away my age a little bit now, but I got a connection to the internet when I was around 19 years old, right? So I actually went through all of high school without an internet connection. And when we first got the internet, we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And we had like this PC mag or something at the time. And it was like typing this address. We went to this address and it was like this, crappy homepage someone had made about werewolves. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's that's interesting. Like, I didn't really care about werewolves, but it was like, well, that's interesting that you can do that. But you could see how unimpressed people could be about that, right? It's like, oh yeah, great. I can go on and see a crappy web page about werewolves. This whole internet thing is amazing, and being really sarcastic and about it. And there were people that were doing that about the internet, right? Like, and there's heaps of examples. Same with PCs and all of that. So I think with VR, like, because I mentor students literally every week all around the world through our partnership program, what I say to them is, look, now that the hardware has got to this point where it doesn't make people sick, the number one rule of VR development is to not create experiences that make people feel sick. Because,
Yep.
and the example that I always give is, like, if you go to a restaurant, even if you have the best meal that you've ever consumed in your life, if you go away and you throw up an hour later because you got food poisoning, that was not a good experience. You're never going back to that restaurant. So now that the hardware is at a stable state, that it doesn't make people sick, and it's quite comfortable for virtually everyone. It's actually quite easy to develop VR experiences that are very comfortable as well. So I think oftentimes people will say to me, well, yeah, I tried VR, but it makes me sick. And it's like, well, when did you try it? Well, I tried it, 4 years ago. I used a Google Cardboard and I was on a roller coaster. It's like, well, yeah, that would make anyone sick.
Yeah. 100%. And it's one of those things as well, isn't it? It's like, I heard something great a while back. I can't remember who said it, but they compared VR to like what TV is to radio. And it's like when radio came out, people that were reading and writing books and stuff and newspapers, everyone was kind of like, well, how is this going to work? How's it going to be useful? It's like 3 stations or whatever it is. And all they really come on with is weather and wartime news. And then it was like TV came out and the radio was going, well, what are we going to use this for? All we do is do the same thing that we did on the news, but now you can see them. And then, games started coming out. I guess games is a little bit of a different genre, but even then everyone was kind of going, well, you have to use this massive, machine to go play Space Invaders, and you've got to go to a bar to do it. And now VR's come out and it's kind of getting past that stage, but it's still not quite there yet. Like you said, it's in that adolescent stage of getting there.
Well, I think that's one of the issues too with the whole concept of the metaverse, right? So, and to speak to your point, I think Chris Milk spoke about it in one of his TED talks, where he said that the first movies were effectively plays on screen, right? Because that was how people knew how to deliver content, and then it made sense to film it. So I think a lot of the because metaverse has become in some ways a bit of a dirty word, especially since Facebook's pivot.
Thanks for that, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the reason why people think that is because a lot of the first iterations of the metaverse are effectively trying to recreate a lot of the crappy parts of real life into a digital space, like walking around in an avatar around a neighborhood, like bumping into people. I'm a bit of a recluse. I don't just walk around to random people's houses and knock on the door and say hi, hey, how you going? I don't necessarily enjoy walking to the shops or walking I drive places. So you have the ability. We're not vetted by the laws of physics. So I think a lot of this issues conceptually with the current evolution of the metaverse, whatever that might be, is a UX issue, right? Where it's like you have the ability to do all this stuff, but what are you doing? You're recreating the real world, but not just that. You're recreating a lot of the shitty parts of the real world, and it's boring, and people aren't interested, and people don't want to do it. And then there's a lack of understanding from the general public. It's like, well, yeah, Meta might be spending $10 billion a year on it, but they're not spending it building those avatars. That they're iterating on the hardware that's going to get us there, and the underlying technology. So I think really speaks to the original point that you made with the whole metaverse and social space in VR. It's about what's the next like UX UI component going to be that's going to bring the whole metaverse together, and it's not going to be, in my opinion, buying a virtual house next to a celebrity and
Yeah.
hoping that one day you'll meet them at the letterbox.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Oh God, the era of virtual real estate. Thank God we're out of that. Um,
Are we out of it? I don't know. Like, I think there's still some a number of companies that are trying to push it, and I don't want to like criticize
well,
anyone, but yeah,
there's something to be said for a 3D, a virtual world that it is finite, where people can, have land in. I think the way it was done, it was marketed as you will be in a Ready Player One VR world. This world will be infinite, and you were going to, like you said, it was marketed like we're going to have Snoop Dogg in this piece of land. You want to buy it around him. It's like
yeah,
that's not what it should really be. If I would be happy the same way I'd fork out a few pounds for a skin in a game to be in a finite world that I love, and it kind of goes, would you like to buy a small piece of land in this world and you can build your house on it or something? And I go, sure thing, I'll pay £4 to buy some land in that world. It helps the developers, and then I have my little piece of virtual real estate. What it shouldn't have been was this like pyramid scheme of like, buy the land now and you can sell it like you can real virtual estate.
yeah, yeah. Yes, 100% agree with with you. I think because people, and there's this whole psychological thing about anchoring, right? I think because people are anchored to the price of real estate, that there was this thing where virtual real estate was sold for a comparable amount, and it made sense for some people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's the same thing as you had with the NFTs. It's kind of like, in principle, NFTs weren't a bad thing. And, lots of them are still kind of going strong. The problem was when you had people paying, just joining a hype train and paying tens of thousands of pounds of dollars for something that didn't actually have any intrinsic value.
Yeah, and look, and you're right. So I'm very pro, Web3 and NFTs and crypto, but I think with NFTs, and I think we're going to see a lot of I think NFTs are just starting, right? But what I think we're going, how it's going to evolve is that those NFTs are going to be have intrinsic value, whether it's accessing content or I know Ticketmaster are doing stuff where when you buy a ticket, you get an NFT that basically proves that you went to that event. Like for example, again, maybe giving away my age, I saw Michael Jackson in his history tour, right? It'd be nice to have an NFT reminder of that, and
Yeah.
I can flex on people that I saw Michael Jackson. And then I think you see what's happening with like Starbucks and the rewards program. So I think you're going from the stage where you have this NFT that's just a JPEG that's been sold for $50,000, to NFTs, that are these like unique, like what they are, non fungible tokens, right? That
Yeah.
represent something or give access to something. And I think that'll play a big role in things moving into the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? At the end of the day, it is simply digital ownership. It's a market digital ownership. So if there's nothing of value attached to that, and value is subjective, then just don't pay for it. I've worked with companies that do amazing NFT projects that link it to their games and stuff. I've also, the last guest I had on, he's talking about kind of NFTs in real estate. Absolutely fascinating thing. The idea of split ownership on something that you buy together. So maybe you buy a holiday house and you own this holiday house, but you've got 50 other keys and digital keys, and people can go and like see it and stuff like that. There's real interesting value there to be had, and there's a future in it. But people buying, like you said, a 10 pixel Bored Ape JPEG for the price I would pay for a real world house probably might have not been the smartest decision.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And also, soul-bound NFTs are interesting, where you can't transfer them; they're locked to your wallet. I think that the whole Web3 space, like again, it's got such a bad rap right now because you had we've been in this terrible bear market. You had like the whole lunar collapse. You had you know all of these effectively frauds or pyramid schemes or scams or whatever you want to call them, and that has really left a really bad taste in people's mouths. And also, you have 25,000 different tokens that are for sale, and like the vast majority of them, maybe 99+%, are really useless in one way or another. But the fundamental technology of blockchain is really so transformative, and there are so many opportunities there that I think we're in a lot of ways, all the bad stuff that happened in 2022 is, if you take a glass half full approach, I think it's going to change how the industry works moving forward. And then I think you're going to see, real novel use cases, like less of these silly, dangerous and corrosive scams. And then people are going to really start to like we're just talking about, see real world practical use cases for NFTs, and the whole industry will evolve with the VR industry, with the AI industry, and it'll all come together and effectively be the next iteration of the internet, regardless of whether we want to call it metaverse or Web3 or what have you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope to God, I think you're right, and I hope to God you are, because that sounds so nice. That's the internet of the future that I want my kids to be experiencing, not some like dystopian data tracking that we seem to be coming from the meta right now. But I mean, yeah, I know I've kept you for about 20 minutes longer than I promised you that I would do. So I think, I mean, that's probably a great note to wrap up on. But I mean, thank you so much for coming on and sharing not only about the VR, but I mean some as we got further on in the convo, some absolutely amazing insights in the Web3 world as well.
No, well, look, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure, and yeah, look forward to seeing, like I was saying earlier, seeing some of your other episodes. Really impressive work that you're doing, and all the best for the podcast moving forward.
Oh, thanks, man.